What's going on, guys? We're back at the Real Bodybuilding Podcast, and I'm here with Paul Saladino. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Before we get started, I wanted to just kind of get a little bit of your history and a little bit of your credentials, because I know you're a doctor. So I just want to kind of explain to everybody who you are, because I think my demographic might not know.
I'm a medical doctor. I went to medical school at the University of Arizona. I did residency at the University of Washington. I'm board certified as a physician nutrition specialist, but really when people ask me this question on podcasts, I just tell them that I'm a surfer and an adventurer who went to medical school twice accidentally. Yeah. And I have a lot of interest in human health and nutrition, primarily because I want to be able to have more fun in my life. I want to feel better. I want to think more clearly. I want to be stronger. I want to be faster. I want to have a libido for my whole life. I don't want to have chronic disease. I just want to keep doing fun stuff my whole life. And so I am fascinated by the foods that humans should or should not eat to do that, and kind of framing that within conversations of what is or is not a species appropriate or evolutionarily consistent diet for humans.
Okay. So in a nutshell, the reason I wanted to have you on the show is because you're known as the Carnivore MD, which means now, did you come up with the carnivore diet, or it's kind of like you specialize in it?
I think our ancestors came up with the carnivore diet, man.
But is there somebody that brought it to the forefront, or was that you that did that?
I think that I could claim a good amount of responsibility for popularizing the carnivore diet and speaking about it at a scientific level. Yes.
Okay. So to my understanding, and I think most people's understanding, the carnivore diet is basically just somebody who eats just meat and nothing else. Is that, that's probably a really simplistic way to talk about it, but is there more to it that you can tell me?
There's a lot more to it than that. That's absolutely the simplest way to think about it. Eat meat. The next level is, how did your ancestors eat meat? And they didn't just eat the muscle meat, they ate the organs too. So Within bodybuilding communities, you guys have known this forever. You know, Vince Gironda was eating liver 20 years ago and 30 years ago or 40. I don't even know when he was. Not a bodybuilder, obviously. But, like bodybuilders have understood nutrition and the way it affects human health and performance for decades. And bodybuilders are often decades ahead of Western medicine. So this is no exclusion of that rule. This is no exception to that rule. In this case, organs are a key part of any animal-based diet. But to give you the more nuanced summary of what I think of as a carnivore diet, you might think of it more broadly as an animal-based diet. Okay. Your audience might be cool with just eating meat all day, every day. Well, but the majority of people want to have a little more variety in their diet. And I think it's good to have a little more variety in your diet. So there are three key tenets that I try to communicate to people. The first tenet is that animal meat and organs are the centerpiece of the human diet and always have been for the last 2 to 4 million years of human evolution. They really made us human. The unique nutrients contained in meat and organs are what sparked the development of the human brain. And so they are integral to human optimal health, human performance. There's no exception to that, period. And they've been incorrectly vilified, incorrectly criminalized for the last 70 years by bad science, predominantly epidemiology, which is observational rather than interventional data. Okay. So animal meat and organs, critical part of the human diet if we want to perform well as a human. Second piece of the equation, plants contain toxins. Not really debatable. Debatable. Okay. Plants exist on a toxicity spectrum. And if we want to be ideal, if we want to perform as well as possible as humans, we should understand which plants are more and less toxic and how those plants affect us individually. There's individual sensitivities to certain plants, but plants are not uniquely benign. If you listen to the mainstream culture today, they'll tell you that kale and broccoli are the best things ever. And that's completely false, totally wrong, and evolutionarily inconsistent. Okay. And so you got to understand that plants have toxins and exist on a toxicity spectrum. Some people choose to eliminate all plants, like I have for the majority of the last 2 years, but not everybody has to. The third piece is probably going to be much more familiar to people, and this is simply that processed foods consisting of seed oils and processed sugars are the major the major culprits to blame for the significant, rapid, precipitous decline in human health over the last 100 years.
Okay.
And these are things like corn, canola, safflower, sunflower, soybean, peanut, grapeseed oil, all the omega-6 rich oils, massively bad for human biology. We can talk about why.
Sure.
And I don't think anybody believes that processed sugar is good for humans. The primary problem there is just simply that processed sugar makes it really easy to overeat.
Yeah.
And when humans have excess calories, if they're not using them, bad things happen in the human body. So those are the three things that I try to communicate to people. It's a little more nuanced, a little more of a richly painted picture of my perspective of human health and disease around an animal-based diet. It includes a nose-to-tail carnivore diet, but it also includes something like a carnivore-ish type diet, which includes the least toxic plant foods.
So there is a carnivore-ish. Like if somebody's doing a little bit of vegetable or a little bit of carb, can they still say I'm on a carnivore diet?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So it's not like a hard and fast rule like being a vegan where it's like all meat is bad, exit out, that's it. So carnivore diet's not that cut and dry.
Not the way that I think about it. Yeah. I don't like to be dogmatic. I think that when I describe my diet to people, and then we can talk about what I eat in a day. When I describe my diet to people and I tell them, I eat meat and organs and fat and bone broth, they kind of go, well, man, I don't know if I could do that every day. And then I tell them that every once in a while I'll eat berries or avocado or butternut squash or honey. And then their eyes kind of light up and they think, oh, I could do that. I could do that. So within the realm of a carnivore diet, I like to expand it to think about like an animal-based diet. The majority of your diet is meat and organs, the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. Yeah. And then you can fill in with a few of the least toxic plant foods. Now, you said, including some vegetables, we might traditionally think of avocado and squash as vegetables, but they're not. They're fruit.
Okay.
And we can talk about those distinctions and why it matters for the plant spectrum of toxicity. But there's a lot of room within animal-based diets for people to tailor it to their own needs. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be low carb. It can be moderate carb. People can use it to build muscle by including carbohydrates if they want to have carbohydrates. The key tenets are, like I said, plants are on a toxicity spectrum. Eliminate the most toxic ones. You'll do fine. You'll do better. Meat and organs, best foods on the planet. Do not eat processed sugar or seed oils and you will kick ass.
Okay. So I'm even more confused now because you said I could have carbs too. So I'm like, okay, so now I'm like, okay, we need to kind of break this down a little bit. So first thing I want to do is get into the animal-based part that you're talking about. So obviously as bodybuilders, we eat a lot of steak and chicken breast and a lot of fish and a lot of that kind of stuff, but I don't know a lot of bodybuilders that eat organs. Now we know that, eating liver is good for you and has tons of amino acids and all these things. But as far as the bodybuilders, I know many of us don't get into the organs, probably just for, as a taste or, it's not really something that we want to eat. What are some animal organs that you would eat on a regular basis that we could find regularly at a grocery store or anything like that?
Great question. So the main organ to start with is liver, and a couple ounces of liver, 1 to 2, even 3 ounces of liver per day is a good idea. But the quality of this matters. You don't want to eat the liver from a cow that's fed in a feedlot. You want to get a grass-fed, grass-finished, preferably organic cow's liver. And then I go further than liver. I'll eat heart, and then I'll go really adventurous and eat spleen or kidney or thymus or pancreas. I ate testicle today because I killed a deer over the weekend.
We'll talk about hunting. We'll talk about hunting later, but before you go on, sorry to interrupt, is it gross?
It's delicious. I think it's good. Testicle is kind of like
not just testicles. All the organs. Like when
I'm telling you, man, you want to eat balls. It's really good. They're hard to get, but you want to eat them. Raw testicle is like scallop, like a raw scallop.
You don't even cook it. You just fucking eat raw.
I just eat them all raw. Yeah. Sometimes I'll blanch them a little bit, but it's not gross. It's an acquired taste. You go back 5 or 6 generations, your ancestors savored it, indigenous culture savored it. But I hear you, and I know your listeners are going, fuck that, I'm never going to eat these things, which is why I built a business, right? So the business is Heart and Soil, and the website is heartandsoil.co. We make desiccated organ supplements. This is the kind of stuff that Vince Gironda was doing.
Okay.
So we take the organs from grass-fed, grass-finished cows in New Zealand. We freeze dry them and we put them into capsules. You can see them here behind me if people are watching. But they're capsules. And we make a beef organs, which has heart, liver, kidney, spleen, and pancreas. We make bone marrow and liver. We make one called lifeblood, which is actually blood plus spleen and liver. Any of those would be fantastic and would really help fill in a lot of nutritional gaps for people that don't want to eat the fresh organs. If you can get the fresh organs, do that. But I understand that 75% of people listening to this are not going to eat fresh organs. 25% of people might, and I love fresh organs, but desiccated organs are awesome even for me if I'm traveling or I can't get these organs. There's just a lot of unique things in organ meats that we're never going to get. And I love anthropology. I love looking at the way the Hadza or the Ikung or the San or the Samburu or these indigenous cultures currently living, have always lived, and looking at the way that other animals in the wild who eat other animals eat, and they always go for the organs first, right? They'll eat the kidney and the liver. And if I was recently on Rogan and we talked about getting to eat the liver within a wolf pack is a sign that you're an alpha. That's the most prized part of the animal. There's tons of muscle meat. Yeah. There's only one liver and it's a lot smaller, and the nutrients in that are unique. And you kind of touched on some of them. There are unique amino acids, anserine, taurine, carnitine, carnosine, but there's also things like riboflavin, methylated folate, there's zinc, there's copper, selenium, there's unique peptides in these organs, which are signaling molecules. So organs are crucial. And if you can't get them fresh, get them desiccated, check us out, Hardened Soil, something like that. So
question, and this question comes up in terms of protein as well, because people are always asking, what's the difference if I eat a steak or if I drink a whey isolate shake, right? And some people say there's no difference, and some people say there is a difference because of the way your body absorbs and digests the actual food. Now, is there a dramatic difference in how my body's going to use your supplements versus the actual organ itself? Like if I get a kidney or a liver, am I going to get more benefit from it, or is it going to be the same?
It's essentially the same because we're freeze drying it. It's the real thing, right? So if you're looking at a whey protein isolate or even a beef protein isolate, the key word there is isolate. Yeah. Right? They're cooking it at high temperatures. They're dehydrating it. We take the organs, we put them at 38 degrees Fahrenheit or 36. Yeah. You lower the pressure and you dehydrate them basically in your refrigerator, right? Okay. So we're dehydrating them at low temperatures to preserve as many of the nutrients as possible. Sure. And your point is well taken. Some people will say, is there a difference between a beef protein isolate shake and a steak, or whey protein isolate and a shake? And there is a difference in my opinion, because when you're eating a steak, you're getting zinc and selenium, right? And CoQ10 and heme iron and riboflavin and a little bit of folate. And you're getting all these nutrients that your body needs, because that's a beef protein isolate shake have coenzyme Q10. Coenzyme Q10 is a part of the electron transport chain, and every mitochondria in your body. Whole food is always better. I don't think this is really debatable. And I think most people will understand this intuitively. And that's why I always say to people, look, if you're a bodybuilder and you are trying to get a massive amount of protein, sure, use the highest quality protein shake that you can, but eat as much real food as you can too. For most of us who are not trying to get more than 200 grams of protein a day, we can eat, I eat 2 pounds of meat a day. I don't need a protein shake, but if you're working with guys who are trying to really push and they see benefit from 300 to 400 milligrams of protein a day, sure, it's going to be hard to eat 4 pounds of meat and get everything else in you need for your calories. In that case, you might have to cut some corners, but make sure you get as much real food as you can. But in answer to your question, our supplements are real food. They're just real food made into desiccated organs. So it's about as good as it gets without eating the real thing.
Yeah, that advice you gave is exactly what we preach on. Like I preach on my show all the time, is to get as much whole food as possible. But the next question that arose is, how much? Because you were saying I need 2 to 3 ounces of liver a day is a good amount. So how much of those?
1 to 3.
Yeah. So how much is that going to mean in terms of capsules, like in your supplements? And this isn't, so for those of you guys who are listening, I didn't even know he had a supplement company. So this is not, this isn't like a ad for, I just didn't know. So I'm trying to kind of figure out, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to go get liver. I've had liver before. I don't like the flavor. And if you're telling me this is going to be the exact same nutrient profile,
pretty good,
then I would rather do that. So how much do I have to take every day to get my needs?
So because it's real food, it's going to be a significant amount of capsules. I would say you'd probably want to get, if you really want to be ideal, you'd want to take anywhere from 12 to 18 capsules a day, depending on the supplement you suggest. But you figure if you're taking real food, there's only so much that I can desiccate it. There's only so much that I can condense a liver for you. So, 12 to 18 capsules is actually not as hard as you think. They're in gelatin. I could do 12 capsules in one handful. I could do 18 capsules all at once.
I'm not saying I can't eat them. I'm saying that's an expensive bill because they're probably like, what, 90 capsules in a bottle?
There's 180 capsules in a bottle.
Yeah, I'm gonna burn through that in like 3 weeks.
It's kind of, I mean, it's kind of the balance of like the whole food nutrition, right? So this is the convenient way to do it. Honestly, I'll tell you this. I think most people are going to feel benefit with 6 capsules a day of anything that we have. 6 capsules a day is going to be about a little less than an ounce of organs combined. We don't have a capsule that's pure liver. We have like beef organs is heart, liver, kidney, spleen, and pancreas.
Okay.
So 6 capsules of that is a little less than an ounce total of all those. Mm-hmm. But when you're eating all those organs together, I think most people will feel a benefit with even an ounce of organs, an ounce of total organs. You know, you're saying what's ideal. I'm saying, 2 to 3 ounces of organs per day, which is going to be 12 to 18 capsules is ideal. And we've got a lot of people that take, you know, some of our lifeblood and some of our histamine and immune and some beef organs. So they are taking 18, they're taking 6 of each. And again, this isn't meant to be a commercial or anything. It's just, it's something that'll help people if you can't get the fresh organs, and it's meaningful to do that work.
How do you have any videos on YouTube about how you cook the organs?
Well, I mean,
because I wouldn't even know where to
organs
start.
Raw, man. So on my website, which is heartandsoil.co, there's an About Us page, and there's a video of what I eat in a day, and you can see me eating all the organs raw.
So you're eating raw liver and everything.
Raw liver. I was at a party yesterday, and I brought raw heart, and we were just all eating raw heart. It's actually really good. It was from a deer that I shot yesterday, and I'm not doing it to be sensational or anything like that.
I get it.
I'll go through them for you. So if you want to cook liver, you just put it in a pan with some tallow and fry it on both sides. You cook it just like a steak. You just want to overcook the liver. You want it to be pink in the middle. Heart's the same way. You can put it in a pan with some tallow and fry it on both sides. It'll be great.
What is tallow?
Tallow is rendered beef fat. So we actually make a supplement called Firestarter, which is tallow in pills, because rendered beef fat from the kidneys, the suet, is uniquely valuable for humans. It has something in it called stearic acid, which has a really cool effect on the human mitochondria. I've talked about this multiple times. And so stearic acid is really a cool 18 carbon saturated fatty acid. It's found in highest amounts in the kidney fat, which is the suet. It's kind of waxy fat. So we encapsulate that, or you can just get fresh
What
suet.
What is the benefit of that?
So when you actually look at these experiments in humans, it's a fascinating trial. They took people and they put them on a vegan diet for 2 days, and they saw the stearic acid levels go down, and they saw changes in the mitochondria. So the mitochondria are these electron transport chain housed powerhouses of the cells. So at a cellular level in humans, when humans are deprived of stearic acid, the mitochondria fractionate, they separate, and they turn off beta oxidation. They stop burning fat.
Okay.
Give these people stearic acid back. This is an animal-based fat. It's not found in plant foods, except there's a few exceptions that are very rare. And the mitochondria fuse, they turn on. You can see the mitochondria actually fusing, and you can see acylcarnitines go down. Acylcarnitines are an indication of beta oxidation. So basically what's happening is when the mitochondria have this fat, stearic acid, they turn on and they start burning fat.
Okay.
So it's really interesting. And what's so cool is that you can see it go both ways. When you deprive someone of stearic acid, their mitochondria fractionate, they're separated, and then you give them stearic acid, the mitochondria fuse, and they turn on. At least they turn on with fatty acid, beta oxidation.
Is the fat in the kidney, the fat that's around the kidney, is that the only place to get the stearic acid, or where can
it's in all animal fat. So it's in a cow's fat. Yeah. But it's highest in the suet, which is the fat around the kidneys. Okay. That's what we use to make the Firestarter, or people use generally to make tallow, but not always. Okay. So any fat from a ruminant animal is going to have stearic acid, but it's like 25 to 30% in the waxy fat around the kidneys. Sure. And people will know this. If they've eaten a fatty steak, that fat feels different in your mouth than suet. If you eat suet, it's very waxy because it's got so much stearic acid in it. It's just kind of a waxy mouthfeel. That's why you can make tallow out of it or encapsulate it or something's better. Okay. So it's a high stearic acid. But eating animals and animal fat, the very foods that have been vilified for the last 70 years by the mainstream medical establishment, will get you a good amount of stearic acid. Okay. But, that's the main thing.
We got onto that because you were telling me about how to cook them, but I have actually more important question than how to cook them is, can I buy them at like a regular grocery store? Can I go to the grocery store and get kidney?
No.
Okay. So that ruins that plan. So where are you if you're not a hunter, where are you getting these raw organs from?
Yeah. So sometimes I cook them, but often I'll eat a lot of them raw. There's farms throughout the country. There's a farm in Georgia called White Oak Pastures. There's a farm in California called Belcampo. I just look for the farms that are doing grass-fed, grass finishing, regenerative agriculture, which means rotational grazing of the animals, which is an ecosystems-based way of raising the animals that kind of mimics the way that these animals have lived on the plains of the United States for millions of years. Yeah. So that's what you can get them online now, and they're in higher and higher demand. I was actually on the phone with the people at White Oak Pastures today, and they said, we can't keep liver in stock since you ate it with Joe Rogan on the podcast. So, I go on Rogan and eat raw liver with Rogan, and they can't even keep the liver in stock, but there's places to get liver online. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so liver would probably be the one that people could get, but unless you're going to a Whole Foods, I don't know what city you live in. If you go to Whole Foods, you might be able to get grass-fed liver sometimes. Beyond that, you're not going to find any other organs, and you're either going to have to know a butcher or buy a whole cow or go to one of these farms online. And so the bittersweet truth of the work I do is that the more successful I am in helping people understand this, the harder it is for all of us to get organs.
Sure.
Which is why we make the desiccated organs.
Yeah, no. The other question, while I want to stay on the animal tenant for a minute, because I wanted to ask you about all the negative studies that come with eating so much animal meat. We constantly hear, like, if you eat too much protein, it affects your kidneys. If you eat too much fat, it's going to raise your cholesterol and be bad for your heart and cause heart disease and all these different things. Now, I know the kidney one is been proven wrong. So I know that protein doesn't affect kidneys, and healthy kidneys anyway. Do you know if it affects your kidneys in compromised kidneys?
Yeah. So if you have chronic kidney disease, you have to watch your kidney function really carefully. Mm-hmm. But you're absolutely right. There's zero evidence in the medical literature that eating a high, quote, protein diet is going to be hard for your kidneys. In fact, there's a lot of good evidence in the medical literature that a, quote, high protein diet is good for bone health and is associated with higher bone density and sometimes improvement in kidney function. Now, if someone has pre-existing chronic kidney disease, that is a decreased glomerular filtration rate or an elevated creatinine, and you want to increase your protein, you got to watch it and see what happens, and you got to be careful. Yeah. But in healthy kidneys, no problem. It's just that if your kidneys are already damaged, you may not be able to process that much protein, but it's not going to cause your kidneys to be harmed.
Okay.
But your question is really good, and this is a really important topic that we should dig into. Now, what's so interesting here is that you illustrated this perfectly. You said we hear that red meat causes heart disease, or that red meat is going to raise your cholesterol and cause heart disease. And in fact, that's not what we hear.
Okay.
That's not what's being said, but that's what we hear. And the media knows this. What the media says is that red meat consumption is associated, right? It's correlated with worse outcomes, but that doesn't mean it causes it. And I'll tell you why. These are epidemiology studies. They're not interventional studies.
What is an epidemiology study, just for me and for everybody listening who doesn't know the term?
These are observational studies. They're observation. There's no experiment being done. They're giving people a survey.
Okay.
And they're saying, how much red meat do you eat? Mm-hmm. How many times do you eat hamburgers? How many times do you eat hot dogs? How many times do you eat salami? And then they look back at their history, or they look forward and they follow them for 5 or 10 years and see how the health outcomes go. Now, correlation is not causation. Here's a question. In some circles, this is the case, but generally speaking, if you go to any McDonald's in this country, or you go to any barbecue among people who are not super health conscious, when was the last time you saw someone eat a hamburger by itself with nothing else?
Never.
No bun, no mayonnaise, no French fries cooked in seed oil, no brownies with high fructose corn syrup, no Coca-Cola in hand, no milkshake, no McFlurry, right? It doesn't happen.
I get it, yeah.
And so what I'm saying here is that this is called unhealthy user bias, and it is so insidious within our culture that it confounds a lot of the studies that are done within Western society. Mm-hmm. Within the United States, within Westernized cultures, for the last 70 plus years, what have we been told about red meat? That it's bad for you. Yeah. That it's bad for you.
Yeah.
And that was based on epidemiology, not interventional, not real experiments. Mm-hmm. So who has eaten more red meat over the last 70 years? The people that also generally ride motorcycles, smoke cigarettes, are more likely to do drugs, drink alcohol, less likely to get a prostate exam or a breast exam, less likely to be in the sun, and more likely to be at a George Strait concert, getting drunk with their friends and, getting arrested. So is it any surprise that their health outcomes are worse? Yeah. But is it the red meat, Or is it everything that comes along with that sort of rebellious lifestyle?
Sure.
And the flip side is also true. Who eats a vegetarian diet? How many rebels do you know who eat a vegetarian diet, right?
Yeah.
These are June Cleaver types, which your audience might not even know who June Cleaver is, but I struggle to think, if you think of the first set as like James Dean types, right? Live fast, die young.
Yeah.
Well, who's the other side? I don't know, some goody two-shoe, whoever you want to say is a goody two-shoe. So if you're a vegetarian, you're doing all the healthy behaviors. You're in the sun, you're playing tennis with your friends, you're golfing with your friends. You're likely to be of a higher socioeconomic status. You're less likely to smoke. You're more likely to get a prostate exam, a colonoscopy, a breast exam. And you're just less likely to have all those factors that are going to make things worse. So this is what confounds epidemiology studies, because they're observational. So they're correlation and not causation.
To break it down for people, it basically means that they're just looking at people eat meat, but they're not looking at anything else they're eating. So they're eating the meat and they're getting all the sugary whatever with it. So they're saying it's caused by the meat, even though it could be caused by all the processed food they're eating at the same time.
They're saying it's correlated with the meat.
Yeah.
But what we hear is caused.
That's right.
We hear the word cause, they're saying correlated.
Sure.
So epidemiology, observational studies are good because they can help us generate a hypothesis, a guess that should be tested with an interventional study.
Sure.
And wouldn't you know it, how often do we hear on the news about interventional studies done with red meat? But they're out there. There are lots of studies that I talk about in my book, The Carnivore Code, that I've talked about on Rogan and my podcast, which is called Fundamental Health, that show that if you replace, so there's a fascinating study that I've quoted many times now. This is an interventional study. This is an experiment, right? That was done over 12 weeks, 8 or 12 weeks. I forget the exact amount of time. They replaced calories in the diet that were carbohydrates. It doesn't say exactly what they were. They were carbohydrates probably from a variety of sources, bread or cereal or grains. They replaced that with 8 ounces, so half a pound, which is a lot in today's standards, of red meat. And they looked to see what happened. This is an interventional study, right? Yeah. This is not epidemiology. This is not observational. And at the end of those 8 or 12 weeks, what do they find? They find inflammatory markers go down and markers of diabetes get better, and people lose weight and their blood pressure improves. So if you look at interventional studies with red meat, they are good because red meat is an evolutionarily, ancestrally consistent food. And there's no interventional studies with red meat that show it's bad for us. There's epidemiology done in the West that continuously or repeatedly correlates these two. And I want to tell you about epidemiology done in Asia to complete the story.
Before you do that, I just need to kind of sparse these things out. Why do we hear the opposite of all those things? We constantly hear that high protein diets or high red meat diets cause more diabetes, they cause more cholesterol, like all the things you said. That inflammation is a major one that we constantly are hearing about with red meat. So is this all because it's correlation? So all of these things are being told to us without any real hard evidence.
Yep.
And they can do
100%.
that.
100%, man.
And that's okay for them to do that.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But it's the media. The media doesn't like red meat, right? The media doesn't like red meat. Mainstream medicine doesn't like red meat. Even physicians that I trained with don't understand how to read studies and don't understand what a correlation in an epidemiology study means. It's not an interventional study. But we're being told these things, and we're being told, like, it's what I said. That's the first part of the piece of an animal-based carnivore diet. Incorrectly vilified, incorrectly criminalized for the last 70 years. Why would a food or a set of foods that made us human, that were at the very center of our evolution as humans for the last 2 to 4 million years, be bad for us?
I can answer that.
It makes no sense.
I can answer that. I have 2 questions, but I will answer that. Most people, when I hear the argument about it, it's because they say that early humans weren't able to eat as much red meat, or not red meat, or as much animal meat as we do now, because it just wasn't readily available. They would hunt, they would eat. It might take time to find another animal or whatever. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but that's what I've heard as the response to that, is the amount of animal protein that we're eating now is much higher than we ate in early civilization, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think there's any evidence for that. If you look at stable isotope studies of Neanderthals and early European Homo sapiens from 50,000 years ago, the stable isotopes really clearly point to the fact that we were, quote, high-level carnivores. Okay. The majority of our protein was coming from meat. and animal foods. Most anthropologists, most historical biologists would agree that humans are meat eaters, and we've eaten the majority of our food as meat for the last 2 million years. It's what made us human.
But the majority of protein coming from meat doesn't mean that we ate it. And I'm not arguing with you here. I'm playing devil's advocate, right? Just because I'm sure there's somebody out there listening that doesn't agree with this. So what they would say is maybe the majority of our protein came from animals, but doesn't mean that we ate them every day.
Well, there's pretty good evidence that we ate a lot of animals, man.
Okay.
And if you look at
that's fair.
And if you look at indigenous hunter-gatherer tribes today,
yeah,
animal foods are clearly the most precious foods.
Okay.
In the Hadza, for instance, in Tanzania, which is a currently living group of hunter-gatherers, when there is animal food in camp, they will stop digging for tubers. They will stop even looking for the plant foods like that. They'll still eat berries and baobab, which is a type of fruit in Africa, but they'll stop digging for tubers. So they'll stop everything else to eat the animal foods when it's available. So I think that these conjectures about the amount of animal foods we were eating, they're just conjectures. Like if you look at how much protein we've been eating, it's pretty clear that we've been eating a lot of animals and they were always treasured. The other thing to consider is that today's animal landscape looks very different than it did 50,000 or even 2 million years ago. There's also stable isotope studies looking at species called Paranthropus, Australopithecus, and Homo habilis from 2 million years ago, showing that the same thing is true, that Australopithecus appears to have eaten a mixture of plants and animals for protein. Paranthropus ate more plants and went extinct. And then Homo habilis went more animal-based and continued on to Homo erectus and then, Homo heidelbergensis and then eventually Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
So if you look at those things, that argues in favor of that as well. And what's needed for humans is protein and nutrients. It's pretty clear. There's a lot of currently living cultures as well, the Mongols or the Inuit, that eat a ton of meat. And so these amount arguments don't make a whole lot of sense to me. It's like either meat is bad for us or it's good for us, right?
Well, but that's not totally true, because you can have something that's good for you, but not in that amount.
Right. But I think these are biologically consistent amounts. I mean, you're not eating 20 pounds of meat a day. You couldn't eat that much, but and then if you're going to make that argument, if somebody's going to make that argument, they have to show me a mechanism by which meat is harmful to humans.
Okay.
And those mechanisms don't exist. Like, why would a food that we have eaten? So this is a really interesting, important point, that the inclusion of meat, the inclusion of more meat and organs in the human diet is probably the single greatest factor in the evolution of the human brain. If you look at the size of the human brain 2 million years ago, it was 500 cc's. Today, it's between 1350 and 1500 cc's. It's tripled in size. And most people will agree that is because we started eating meat and animals. So you can make the amount argument, but nobody's really ever been able to show me a mechanism by which meat is harmful to humans. I think that in this case, it's like, hey, most of our ancestors got the majority of their food as animal foods.
I do have another question about that, though. You keep saying meat and organs, and I know that's a very important distinction. I don't know if the average person says, I want to do the carnivore diet, I don't know. I don't think a large percentage of those people are going to eat the organs. I think they're just going to eat the muscle, right? So does that make a difference? Because there's more, but sorry, before you answer, the reason I say that is because there's a lot more nutrients in the organs. So if somebody's just eating the muscle, are they getting what they need if they're just going to eat like steak every day, 4 times a day?
But I'll tell you what, so if people are making an intentional choice with their diet, I bet for most people, a diet of exclusively meat is going to be better than what they were eating before. So that's going to be an improvement. But you're going to get deficient in folate. You're going to get deficient in riboflavin. You're going to get deficient in retinoic acid, which is vitamin A. You're going to get deficient in copper. You're not going to get it all, but you'll do okay. I mean, you'll do good. There are people in the space. Now, if you add eggs to that, it gets to be a little better. And most people will eat, steak and eggs. Yeah. That's decent. You're starting to get a little more of those things. I think liver is critical for a lot of reasons. Okay. Eggs are not a great source of riboflavin, but they're a little better in folate, a little better in vitamin A. And then if you add stuff like salmon, or you add a few other foods in there, you're starting to complete it a little bit. Really, the key is just eat the organs like your ancestors did, either fresh or desiccated, which is why we do what we do. But for a lot of people, eating more meat is going to be an improvement in their diet, because the meat is going to replace Pop-Tarts, pizza.
No, I agree.
Roll.
I agree 100%. I wanted to just make sure that I knew that was an important part of it, because I don't think a lot of people understand that the organs are what completes the diet.
I agree. So, I think it is. And and we keep coming back to this, but I don't think it's something that's possible to belabor, which is that's how our ancestors have always eaten. And you bring up this great point, but I think that there's a lot of wisdom in where we've come from as humans. I don't think humans will ever be able to completely shed our past. That over the last 2 million years, I think it's a very reasonable argument to say what our ancestors have done for the last 2 million years is probably what we should be doing today, for the most part, if we want to be well. And that goes way beyond food. That goes into real human connection and wilderness, and social media is a strange part of that, and we don't have to go down those rabbit holes, but there's a lot there to unpack.
What I want to get into is something you said earlier about the doctors and how they vilify red meat and they vilify just meat in general. And it's confusing to me as to why a doctor would do that. Is there a lobby against red meat and animal meat, or is it just they're not looking at the same studies you're looking at? Like, what is it? Why would a doctor who's trying to help their client, the people that are coming to see them, why would they not tell them that this is better for them if it's that clear to you?
We are not taught in medical school or residency about nutrition.
That I do know. Yeah. And so it's just a flat out ignorance.
It's ignorance. And so all we know is what we hear on the news and what the guidelines are. And the guidelines are often made by people who are biased, and the guidelines are influenced in a lot of different ways. And so if you look at the sheer volume of studies, I definitely want to talk about epidemiology in the Eastern countries, because it really clears things up. If you look at the sheer number of studies that are epidemiological in the United States, I can't fault most physicians for being confused. It's just, I don't think that we're taught this way in medical school. And this is the great irony of all of this, that none of this did I learn in medical school. These are all dots that I had to connect after medical school because I was curious and really wanted to know what caused human disease. What was really causing our human disease? We're not taught that in medical school. We're taught what medication you give for a certain disease. We're not taught how to fix it. We're taught how to band-aid it. We're taught we're taught how to put the donut on the car, the spare tire. We're not taught how to fix a flat, right?
Does it seem completely absurd to you that a doctor can go to school for 4 years or 7 years or however many years? Because doctors I know, their nutritional portion of their studies is like 3 or 4 months.
Not even.
And I'm like, how did you go to school for 7 years and you just learned like barely what I learned in like by watching a couple YouTube videos?
I've never met a doctor who had 3 months of nutrition. I think we might get 1 hour in 4 years of medical school.
But isn't that completely absurd considering the key to all of our health is nutrition? Not
when most studies are funded by pharmaceutical companies.
I see. That's the issue.
Yeah, man, it's a sad state. And I'm not saying that the pharmaceutical companies are trying to prevent us from understanding information. I'm just saying that medical school curricula are biased toward pharmaceuticals. What was on my boards was how you treat something, how you treat it with a medication, what medication you use for this, what are the side effects of this medication, what is the pathology of this disease, how do you treat it with medication. There were probably 2 questions on all my boards. In medicine, you take 3 sets of boards: step 1, step 2, step 3, then your specialty boards, et cetera, then your subspecialty boards, lots of boards. Maybe over the course, you had 1 or 2 questions on celiac disease and gluten intolerance, which actually involve food. Beyond that, I never had a question that said something to the extent of, this person has an autoimmune disease. How do you treat this? How do you actually get to the root cause of this person's autoimmune disease? Because within Western medicine, we are not challenged to ask those questions. But I cannot tell you the number of times that I have gotten emails from people, seen on my social media, or gotten DMs from people with autoimmune diseases, Sjogren's, multiple sclerosis, scleroderma, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, who have had those autoimmune diseases resolve with dietary change. And they're telling me because it did a carnivore or a carnivore-ish diet and it got better, and their doctor's the one with their jaw on the floor going, how did you do that? Well, it fixed my diet, right? Changed my diet. So you're absolutely right. One of my main goals in the future is to change medical education, but it's hard, man. It's hard because we're fighting an uphill battle, but it's very telling. I love getting in the nutritional conversations with physicians because it's very fast that they realize that they didn't get this education. And like you said, it's not for lack of good intention or intelligence in these physicians. It's a lack in the medical curriculum.
Do you think people would benefit from seeing homeopathic doctors? Because are they more versed in nutritional studies?
That word is very murky, my friend. I don't even know what a homeopathic doctor is, man, because homeopathy is technically a series of serial dilutions of something where you have these homeopathic dilutions. And like, but if you're using the word, if somebody's saying like more of a natural doctor or something,
that's kind of where how I meant
unfortunately, I don't think so, because they're all across the board.
Yeah.
You know, I went to traditional medical school. I have an MD.
Yeah.
And a lot of my friends who are naturopathic doctors, they're bought into the plant-based thing because, you know, that, and I disagree with them on that stuff. So I do think that if you go to see someone outside of a mainstream Western doctor, they may be more into that, but they could also be into chakras or Ayurveda or whatever the heck. That's the problem is there's no standardization and you have no idea what that person finds to be helpful for the patients. They could be into a plant-based diet. They could be doing all kinds of stuff. They could be into psychedelics and shamanic stuff, you know, and all of that may have a place in time, but I think that fundamental nutritional biochemistry is where it's at for most people. And that's the foundation. Yeah. And very few doctors are doing that.
I wanted to touch on the second tenet that you discussed, which was the vegetables. Now, you mentioned something about the toxicity of vegetables and how you're okay with people eating vegetables of low toxicity. Number one, I don't think people think of vegetables as being toxic. Number two, I think people, isn't there, well, I don't want to say I think people. Number two, isn't there a level of toxicity to meat?
So you're right. People don't think of vegetables as toxic, but they are highly toxic. And the answer to your second question is no, there is no toxicity to meat. So I'll explain this.
Really?
Yeah, there's no toxicity in meat. There are no toxins in meat.
What about wait a minute, what about the fat? That's like, if I get a steak and then eating the fat that's with the steak, isn't there toxins in the fat?
No, it's good for you.
There's nothing bad in it.
There's nothing bad in the fat, unless the animal is fed crappy food, right?
That's okay.
Right. So that's not coming from the animal. That's coming from the way the animal was raised.
Okay. But if I'm eating a cow from a feedlot instead of a grass-fed cow.
Yeah. If you're eating a cow from a feedlot, as opposed to a grass-fed cow, the grains that cow are fed are probably sprayed with pesticides, glyphosate, which is a water-soluble toxin, atrazine, which is a fat-soluble toxin, could have mold toxins on it. So yeah, the fat from that animal or the muscle from that animal may accumulate toxins. Those are not intrinsic to the animal, right?
No.
The animal didn't make those defense chemicals.
You're right.
This is apples and oranges here. Plants make defense chemicals.
I understand. I feel like I'm really trying to break this thing down as far as possible for people listening, because the people that watch this show aren't all bodybuilders. There's a lot of guys that are just normal guys that want to get in shape, and they watch the podcast for advice on how to get in shape. And I think some of them would benefit from the carnivore diet. So I think
all of them would, brother.
Yeah. No, I really feel like it's important to make sure they know that any old steak is not going to be okay. They got to get the grass-fed steak that's been, raised properly.
Well, let me comment on that, because I think it's an important point. I want to be sensitive to where people are financially. And look, we all have to make a decision. What is your highest quality of life? What are you going to prioritize financially? There's a lot of access to grass-fed, grass-finished meat now that is pretty affordable. You can get grass-fed, grass-finished ground beef for $4 to $5 a pound. Yep. You can get grass-fed stew meat for $7 or $8 a pound. A grass-fed ribeye is going to cost you $20 a pound. Not everybody can afford that, nor I understand that, nor should they be able to be. And honestly, I often don't even want to pay for $20 a pound for a grass-fed ribeye. So I opt for the cheaper cuts. And the meat that I eat is generally $7 to $8 a pound stew meat. But I also want to be sensitive that for some people, $7 to $8 a pound is more than they can afford. And in that case, I want them to know, look, do the best you can with your meat. If the only meat that you can afford is traditionally raised, that is better than nothing, right? But is it better than nothing?
But is it better than like different foods? That's kind of what I'm trying to draw that line, right? Like, is it better?
I believe it is.
That's what I'm trying to say. Is like, is it better to eat the carnivore diet, even if you can't get the grass-fed stuff, than it is to eat just a balanced diet?
It depends what your quote balanced diet consists of, but I think my answer to your question is yes.
Okay.
That meat is meat and meat is nutritious, and your body has some ability to detoxify things, and none of us is going to live forever. Obviously, we've created this clear hierarchy for people and educated them that the most important, the best option is grass-fed, grass-finished, both from an ethical perspective and an ecological perspective and environmental perspective. And for those who can't afford that, you can eat meat that you can afford. But if you want to reallocate your finances, I think it's worth it to invest in slightly more expensive meat. And for me, the meat that I eat, that food that I eat is a priority, right?
Yeah.
So, but I'm not going to tell other people how to manage their finances.
No, of course. Yeah.
For some people, they have kids, kids soccer, whatever. They have other expenses that they need to manage. But for me, if I didn't have enough money to buy the best meat, I would sell my car. I would ride my bike places, right? I would get a cheaper cell phone. I would find a way, because it's such a huge priority for me. So we can make the priorities, but everybody's going to have to exist within their own framework. So I think that it's tricky, right? If your point is well taken. You said, what if somebody can only eat conventional meat and a balanced diet? Well, in that case, they're certainly not eating organic produce and organic plants. Yeah. So they're going to get the toxins either way. And I think you might as well get, because you're going to get grains, or you're going to get, plants and you're going to get plant toxins. I think in that case, the meat is still better, that the more meat you include, and especially organs or desiccated organ supplements, the better you're going to do. Obviously, it's important to do the higher quality, but if you can't afford that, don't let it be an impediment.
Okay. So let me ask you this. So let's get into the toxicity level of vegetables, but is there a way to measure the level of toxicity of a vegetable, say, and a conventionally raised cow? Like, is there a way for somebody to be like, well, there's this much toxicity in this, and there's this much toxicity in that? Or are we just guessing? Or like, how do we measure the level of toxicity of a certain thing?
Yeah, good question. We don't have an objective metric to do that. Okay. Somebody's going to have to do their own laboratory, their own test tube, N of 1. But there's a fundamental difference here, and I want to draw this distinction. Plants are rooted in the ground. They are rooted in the ground, and they have been rooted in the ground for 450 to 500 million years of coevolution with animals. They have hundreds of millions of years to develop plant defense chemicals. This is not conjecture. This is not fairy tale. This is botanical fact. There is no question that plants have toxins. The question is how good each of us are at detoxifying these chemicals. There are so many toxins in plants. There are things like phytoalexins, which are plant defense chemicals. There are oxalates, lectins, saponins, tons. The list goes on and on and on. There's tons. Isothiocyanates, right? These are plants' efforts to dissuade fungi, bacteria, insects, and animals, including humans, from over-consuming them. But if you put yourself in a plant's shoes or roots, I guess plant shoes are their roots, and you think about what part of a plant, a plant doesn't want anyone to eat it. Definitely doesn't want its stems, its leaves, its seeds, or its roots to get eaten. That destroys the plant. But it does want its fruit to get eaten generally. So there is a part of a plant that is less toxic, generally speaking. And most people get this, that, hey, look, if you're eating a fruit, the plant is kind of offering it to you. It's saying, here, eat my fruit. I'm going to give you some calories, a few nutrients, and I hope you'll spread my seeds somewhere else. But it doesn't want you to eat the seeds, generally speaking. There's toxins in apple seeds and peach pits and all these things. So let's go and talk about the toxic parts of plants, and then we'll talk about the non-toxic parts of plants. Okay. You've used the word vegetable a few times, and I just want to be clear that vegetable is just a colloquial term, and it means stems, roots, leaves. Those are vegetables. Yep. People might consider beans to be a vegetable, in which case we're getting into the seeds. But the seeds, I think, are the most toxic parts of plants, and this includes seeds, nuts, grains, and beans, which are called legumes. Okay. This is like a little baby Moses put on the river, and it's totally vulnerable. All of the plant's reproductive efforts, the plant goes to so much effort to make a seed, and it's totally vulnerable. If an animal bites half a seed away, it's dead. That seed is never going to grow. Seeds are packed with plant defense chemicals, packed. Digestive enzyme inhibitors, phytates, oxalates, compounds that chelate minerals. So all plant seeds are quite toxic. And anyone who's done an almond binge or ever been to a fancy vegan dinner where everything is made out of almonds and, you have like steak made out of almonds and everything made out of, how bad your stomach hurts.
Okay, wait.
Farts are after that.
I have to interrupt. So aren't there actual diets based on the benefits of seeds, like sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, and now you're telling me these things are toxic. And I'm like, but there's actually diets that that tell you to add seeds because of the benefit and the minerals that you might get from them. And then you're also saying about almonds, but I thought the almond thing was always just because our bodies didn't break them down properly in like digestion, because we couldn't like chew them enough, so we didn't break them down properly. So that's why that's kind of our body's like way of saying, hey, don't eat that. I didn't think it's because they were releasing any toxins.
They're definitely releasing toxins. There's an interesting series of case studies in kids with genitourinary disorders.
Okay.
And these were kids with like recurrent urinary tract infections, recurrent kidney stones, pain, cystitis, inflammation of the bladder. And the commonality between all of them was that all the kids were being fed almond milk, right? So there's no question that almonds are not good food for humans. Now, I should say, this is not to say that our ancestors never ate plants, but I want to make it very clear that throughout human evolution, our ancestors always favored animal foods, and they used plant foods as fallback foods, as survival foods. During times of scarcity, you can use plants. That's what's beautiful about being a human and why we are, quote, omnivorous. But animal foods are where it's really at. They're what people are always trying to get evolutionarily. So in cultures where seeds are eaten, they often go to great lengths to detoxify them. They ferment them. They'll soak them. You know, they do all kinds of things to make
actually true.
Edible. There's clearly a knowledge that there's toxicity here. Have you ever tried to eat a raw bean?
Yeah, you can't.
Well, you can't because they're hard, but if you actually pull them off the vine, they're soft. And you certainly can. But 3 to 4 raw beans, depending on the type of bean that you're eating, will cause you to vomit and crap your pants and be horribly painful within a few hours. Yeah, beans are frankly toxic. You can definitely eat a raw bean off the vine, and it will tell you immediately that this is toxic for you.
Okay, so again, I have to interrupt because people are always talking about the benefits of beans, mainly the fiber and this and that. So I don't eat beans personally because an abundance of fiber actually hurts the way I can take in a lot of calories for a bodybuilding diet, because it'll just slow me down.
An abundance of calories also depletes you of nutrients, but yeah, go ahead.
What do you mean?
Well, fiber is known to bind to minerals and prevent their absorption. So there are experiments done with oysters, which are full of zinc, and all bodybuilders and people that want to be healthy, especially dudes, love zinc because it's a precursor, or it's involved in testosterone formation and zinc finger proteins. You can give someone oysters and you can see the zinc level in the blood go up. And then you can do a second experiment where you give someone zinc, or you give someone oysters and beans, and the level of zinc in the blood is less than half. And then you give someone zinc, you give someone oysters and beans and tortillas, and there is no zinc absorbed. There is no zinc absorbed.
Really?
So this is the problem with fiber and all of these anti-nutrients in these foods. And fiber can be an anti-nutrient. It prevents the absorption of minerals in your body. I had to interject that.
Sorry, this is amazing, because my training partner, Paul, is constantly going on about fiber and how amazing it is. So I'm going to make sure I clip this part of the podcast and send it to him and let him know that he's actually poisoning himself.
There's a whole chapter in my book about fiber. Fiber is a huge fallacy. It generally just causes people problems. There's tons of misconceptions about this. We can go down the fiber rabbit hole if you want, but there's lots of rabbit holes we got going on right now. So.
I know there is. We're kind of jumping all over the place, but there's just so much to talk about, because
I know
the fiber thing. You know, the fiber thing is important because I know they say it lowers cholesterol, and a lot of guys in my age,
that's predicated on the fact that lower cholesterol is better, which is a falsehood as well. So if you believe that if you believe that low density lipoprotein or that cholesterol is directly causative for atherosclerosis, you might think it's good that fiber lowers it, but it lowers it a very small amount. The studies I've seen are 3.6 to 4.5 milligrams per deciliter, which is nothing.
Okay.
So fiber doesn't really lower cholesterol, nor do you want it to, nor do I believe that the evidence shows that LDL is directly causal for atherosclerosis. So there's a nuance there.
The other reason I think people talk about fiber so much is the satiation aspect. If you eat fiber in your diet, it satiates you. You're not going to eat as much, and it'll be easier to lose weight. Is that nonsense?
False. So if you look at the studies with fiber and weight loss, it doesn't help. Okay. Because you know how humans are supposed to get satiated? You're supposed to get satiated when you eat nutrient-rich food. You know what else is satiating?
Protein satiates
you. Steak.
Yeah, protein satiates you. Yeah.
You know what else is satiating? Like nutrient-containing organs and meat. And you don't have to. Satiation is not just about stuffing your stomach till it's totally full. I had a friend growing up who was in the Rangers, And he said that at one time, one of these things they had to do, they starved them for days. And guys were eating toilet paper and drinking water. That's essentially what we're saying when we're talking about fiber and satiation. This is a non-nutritive substance.
Okay.
You're putting it in your stomach and you're just trying to expand your stomach. That's not how satiety works. There's feedback in your brain and the ventromedial hypothalamus. There's feedback throughout the body that creates true lasting satiety for humans. And just filling your stomach to the point that you're like, it hurts. That's not satiety.
It's such another rabbit hole I want to go down now. Geez. Okay. Let's go all the way back. So we'll go back. We started this with the toxicity of vegetables. So what vegetables are allowed in the carnivore-ish diet or carnivore diet? What vegetables do you recommend that people eat that aren't toxic?
So traditionally, no vegetables. I'm talking about fruit, right? And there are sweet and non-sweet fruit. If you look at indigenous cultures like
because you're saying that some vegetable, we're using the term vegetable wrongly.
Loosely, yes.
Yeah, okay,
yes.
Okay.
Right. So there are many non-sweet fruits like avocado, olives, and squash, which is a variety of things. Cucumber, zucchini, butternut squash, kabocha squash, acorn squash. These are all fruit, right?
Okay.
So these are all foods that I think are less toxic for humans, along with sweet fruit, watermelon, apples, pear, cherries, peaches, berries. See how people respond to them. Personally, what I've noticed is that if I eat a lot of fruit, it just makes me very hungry. And I think our ancestors would have eaten fruit when it was available. But seasonally, depending on our latitude, fruit is pretty freaking rare. I mean, berries are around occasionally, but I don't think they're around all the time. They're certainly not available. I live in Austin, Texas, man. There's no way I'm getting strawberries this time of year, but I can go to Whole Foods and have a pound of strawberries in 10 minutes if I want to. That's not very consistent. It's not the end of the world. But what I have found is that the non-sweet fruits are the more satiating ones if we want to include carbohydrates in our diet. And I do think there is a place for that for most people. Again, there's lots of rabbit holes here, benefits of ketogenic diets versus cycling ketosis, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there's another carbohydrate source that is really ancestrally consistent, which is honey, which is kind of on the border of a plant food versus an animal food. It's not a vegetable, but there are foods. So, when we look at the less toxic foods, it's not a huge list, but then again, my suggestion, or what I'm suggesting here, what I'm putting forth is that our ancestors didn't eat a lot of things like roots and stems and leaves and seeds. And if they had to, they detoxified them a lot, or they ate them as fallback foods. Remember the Hadza? They eat honey, meat and organs, berries, baobab fruit, and then they eat tubers. They eat 5 foods, according to this paper. And they consistently rate tubers as the last food. That's the least favorite food of any of those guys. They don't want to eat tubers if they don't have to. And they'll stop eating tubers, generally because they're tuber fibrous and they're kind of dependent from plants. So it's not really, quote, vegetables, right? But you look at the way that indigenous hunter-gatherers eat food, they're not going around eating a bunch of plant leaves unless they're totally starving. These plant leaves suck. There's no caloric density there. They're not that bioavailable in the nutrients. And yet we've been told that kale is amazing and spinach is great. And I'm saying, no way. Kale is full of tons of toxins. Spinach is full of oxalates. I can't even tell you how many thousands of cases of kidney stones are caused every year by the oxalates in spinach and other vegetables. So when we're talking about plant foods, I want people to think about it from an evolutionary perspective, an anthropologic perspective, and realize, hey, these are the more evolutionarily consistent foods. That's what we're trying to understand. What is a species appropriate diet for humans? Occasional, some carbohydrates, honey, fruit, sweet fruit, non-sweet fruit. See what works for you and what your goals are. Like you said, for a lot of people, fiber is just a big negative. I have found that I don't really like having a ton of fiber in my diet either. And a lot of people feel much better without fiber. So we can go down the fiber rabbit hole a little bit right now if you want, because it's a fascinating one.
No, it's okay. What I wanted to say was, so far it sounds like I can do your diet pretty easily, because if I can have, you say unsweetened fruit. So I'm thinking things like you said, cucumbers, or sweetened fruit like tomatoes, anything like, to me, I'm like, okay, I'm good. That means I can have a salad, just not have the leafy parts of it, which is fine.
Right. So tomato is a nightshade. So if we get
one
layer deeper, there are some foods that are fruit that are probably not great for humans. That whole family of nightshades does generally cause people immunologic problems. If you tolerate tomatoes, more power to you, man. But generally speaking, if somebody's got back pain or knee pain and I have them take out tomatoes and eggplant and these fruits that are in the nightshade family, they do way, way better.
Are you going to tell me I got to take tomatoes out of my diet?
Look, man, you define your quality of life, not me.
You're
You
telling
tell me what your highest quality of life is.
So you're telling me, like, if I'm having, like, sometimes my knees bother me, all right? Well, obviously there could be other foods that are causing it, but you're telling me tomatoes could be the cause.
I'm telling you, it could definitely be one of the causes,
Why?
along with kale or spinach.
What's the definition of a nightshade vegetable, and why is it causing me so much anguish?
So it's from a family of plants. This is a phylogenetic characterization of plants, and the family of plants is Solanaceae, which is nightshades. There are things like Datura, which is a deadly nightshade, and there's a lot of other plants in there that are known to contain toxins like solanine. White potatoes were frankly toxic before we changed them and made them a little more digestible for humans, but white potatoes are a nightshade, and they still make solanine when they are stressed. Those little green buds on a potato are full of solanine, which is a toxin. Okay. So it's just the family of plants makes toxins. We've used them culturally over the last few hundred years, maybe 1,000 years. But for a lot of people, there are some major problems. You can maybe make the tomato less toxic by taking off the skin and the seeds. But how many people who eat tomato are going to take away the seed and the skin, right? Like, that's why I just say, like, just make it easy. Like, just tomatoes are probably not a good thing. So this is what's interesting for you. And I would love for you to try this if you want. Obviously, it's your choice. It would be so cool for people. What I'm trying to do is not convince everybody to stop eating all plants for the rest of their lives. I want people to understand there's a tool here. There's a tool to reimagine which foods are good for us and bad for us. And if you're not thriving you're not 10 out of 10 in every box, right?
Yeah.
Joint pain, energy, libido, body composition, sleep. Why not try and modify this a little bit and see what gets better? I hear people all the time, their joint pain gets better when they cut out the majority of plant foods. And I can't tell you how many people tell me their gut, they're pooping, they're more regular, less diarrhea, less pain, less gas, less bloating when they decrease the fiber. Especially when they decrease nuts. So a lot of this goes against the conventional wisdom, but I think it's super interesting, and it's a very powerful tool for people to really begin to think, oh, there's another option here. If people are listening to this and they are kicking ass, man, just send me an email and tell me about it, because we want to know what you're doing to kick ass. But a lot of people could improve in something, and that's why I think it's valuable to know there are other ideas out there.
When we talk about toxicity, it feels like such a loose term. What am I feeling when I feel, okay, if my toxicity level starts to elevate in my body, right? What are some of the things I'm going to feel? Are we like, because
everybody's a little different.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody's a little different. So for me, I get eczema.
Okay.
I get a skin rash. I grew up with asthma and eczema. I think everybody's got sort of an immunologic Achilles heel.
Sure.
Everybody's got something that breaks first. Some people might get depressed. Some people might get angry. Some people might get anxious. Some people might get a skin rash. Some people might get, irritable bowel syndrome. Some people might get joint pain. Some people might get sleep disturbance. Some people might get, more severe manifestations, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, Sjogren's, multiple sclerosis, all kinds of things. So everybody's going to manifest a little differently depending on where your body has the Achilles heel immunologically. Some people might get cardiovascular disease or gout or all these things. So, but a lot of it is similar immunologically.
So if you have any kind of ailment going on, your first priority should be to lower any of the foods that we've discussed that have toxicity levels, that higher toxicity levels.
I think it's a fantastic first step, and elimination diets like that are so powerful. It doesn't really cost anything. Usually it costs less because you're eating less of these foods. You have to replace them with something, but there's no side effects. And that's what's so interesting about a carnivore diet is that if you eat a lot of meat and organs, you're going to get all the nutrients you need to thrive. I've said that in my book and multiple times on podcasts. You can get all of the nutrients that you need to thrive as a human from animal meat and organs. We know this. There's nothing left out. And so you're not going to get nutrient deficient. Now, the reverse is not true. You cannot get everything you need to thrive from plants. Again, here we are illustrating plants are survival food. They are fallback food. They're clearly second-class citizens. There's so many things in there: creatine, carnitine, choline, carnosine, full spectrum K2, B12, B6, riboflavin, folate. List goes on and on. Anserine, taurine. You can't get any of that, any significant quantity from plants.
Yeah. One of the main things I want to ask you about is, and actually this is in terms of bodybuilding, is we value our carbohydrates a lot when we're trying to build muscle. So where do carbohydrates fit into the diet? Is there carbohydrates in the diet when we're talking about starchy carbohydrates like oatmeal, or you already said potatoes are toxic, so potatoes are out. But what about rice, like white rice? Is white rice out because it's processed, or do you do brown rice? Like these kind of things, like how does that work?
Yeah. So I think that there are less toxic carbohydrates, and
Okay.
white rice is probably fine for a lot of people. But for some people, it couldn't cause immunologic issues. For majority of people, it's going to be fine. It's basically just amylose.
Okay.
But I would favor white rice over brown rice. You don't want the
Yeah.
arsenic in the hull of brown rice. You don't want that. You don't,
Yeah.
I mean, white rice can be great, but I had a client just the other day who emailed me. And so he was doing a carnivore diet. He had no carbohydrates. He's not a bodybuilder,
Yeah.
but he was saying, I'm cramping. I'm kind of lethargic. And I said, add carbohydrates back. Long-term ketogenic diets generally don't work for humans.
Mhm.
Cyclic ketosis is great, but long-term ketogenic diets can be problematic for humans because of electrolyte balance and overall low levels of insulin signaling, which are needed for human physiology. So I do think there's a place for carbohydrates in a carnivore-ish diet. I do think there's a place for cycling lower levels of carbohydrates into your diet, depending what your goals are.
Mhm.
White rice is an option. Squash is an option. Sweet potatoes may be an option for some people, though they're a little higher in oxalates.
Mhm.
Berries and fruit are an option, and honey is an option. So there are options here for people if they want to include a lot of carbohydrates. They just need to be honest with how they're doing with them. I would not use oats.
That's what I was going to
Oats
ask
are
you.
very high in phytic acid. I have a lot of personal stories of repetitive stress fractures from lots of oats in my diet. Again, the phytic acid is chelating the minerals that are supposed to be in there and getting in. So oats are not my favorite. Wheat is not my favorite. There are ways to do it. And you can do low fructose or higher fructose, depending how you handle fructose. But I do think if you want starchy carbohydrates, my first go-to would be squash, then probably something like white rice and maybe sweet potatoes, depending how you do with that. And I get that. There definitely are people who can do it with lower carbs, but if you guys want to put more in, there's an option for that, I think, from an ancestrally consistent lens as well.
Okay, so if I want to now, but there's got to be a level where it becomes no longer a carnivore diet. Like if I say I want to eat 500 grams of carbs a day, you're not like from rice. It's no longer a carnivore diet, is it?
Well, like I don't really think we need to make those distinctions. Are you prioritizing animal foods? And who's to say, like, why do you have to label yourself as a carnivore anyway? Like that's just
I'm just trying to figure out, like, it's not because it's a label. I'm just trying to figure out where the diet, where it's kind of no longer kind of what you're what you're prescribing, right?
My perspective would be if you are prioritizing meat and organs and you are thinking about a toxicity spectrum of plant foods, you're essentially eating a carnivore-ish diet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's fine. I mean, it's not like, we're in the community, in my perspective, it's not quite like vegans where we're trying to virtue signal by being a carnivore and all this stuff. Like, but my takeaways for people are, again, realize meat and organs are so valuable for humans, and, think about the plant toxicity spectrum and eliminate the most toxic plants. You're going to do way better.
You said you can build muscle on the carnivore diet, and I know there is a distinction between the carnivore diet and the keto diet, obviously, but is it going to be harder for somebody to build muscle on the carnivore diet? Because it doesn't seem like carbs are a major priority of the diet, right? So, I mean, is it easy to build muscle on the carnivore diet?
If you're eating 500 grams of carbs as rice, I think you'll be just fine, my man. So, if you came to me as a client and said, hey, my goal is muscle building and I am 250 pounds, and I just want to put on muscle, I'd be like, great. How much can you eat? Like, you want to eat 500 grams of carbs as rice? Do it. Make sure you get 250 grams of protein and steak, get some good animal fat, get some organs or get some desiccated organ capsules. And that could be it, man. Like you don't have to eat. I would say maybe lose the tomato and lose the salad. And I think you'll feel better. And I want to see how your joints feel. But you could do like carnivore plus rice. That we're getting into Stan Efferding's world here, a little bit of like a vertical diet type of thing. Although I'm good friends with Stan, and Stan will put in like some orange juice or some broccoli. I'm like, Stan, why did you put spinach in there, man? You don't need spinach. But you could do carnivore plus rice and be completely good on this diet. I think that would actually be a great hack for people so they could get all these calories and they'd be just fine. And you'd be getting the nutrients with very few toxins. So the way I think about it is this. this will encapsulate it for people. You want to get the most nutrients in the most bioavailable forms with the least amount of plant defense chemicals and toxins.
Yeah.
And so you could do meat, organs, fat, salt, rice, and crush it. And you could absolutely build muscle. I don't actually know what would be better than that. That sounds ideal to me because everything else is just filler. You think a tomato's helping you build muscle? No way, man. There's no muscle building on tomatoes.
So basically this is a bodybuilding diet. Like if you're adding the rice, it's just a bodybuilding diet, because that's pretty much what, I mean, bodybuilders are notorious for eating oatmeal, but other than that, that's pretty much a bodybuilding diet. But the one thing I did want to touch on was we are notorious for egg whites and chicken. And since you mentioned Stan is like anti-chicken, anti-egg whites, because he said the nutritional value is much lower than red meat, or I think he calls it 4-chamber stomach animals. So
ruminants.
That's right. So where do you stand on that? Like if I'm doing the carnivore diet and I eat a lot of chicken, is that okay?
Why would you do that? Chicken sucks.
Listen, I'm just asking. There's a lot of people out there that aren't vegans or vegetarians, but they just don't eat red meat.
And I don't know why they don't eat red meat. I think they're not eating. I don't know why people aren't eating red meat. Maybe they're afraid of the fat or something. But
some people don't like it, and some people it's religious.
Yeah. So if it's religious, then do what you got to do, right?
Yeah.
But there's lamb or whatever. There's a lot of red meat that's not a cow if you don't want to eat a cow.
Yeah.
Or there's a lot of kosher meats out there that are fine for people. But I agree with Stan completely. Like red meat from a ruminant is much more nutritious in many ways than chicken breast. Chicken breast is fine, but it's just there's almost no fat. There's not a lot of flavor. And certainly, why would you eat the egg white when you could just eat the whole egg? The yolk has so many good nutrients, man. Get the cholesterol, get the choline, get the vitamin A, get what's in the yolk. You're throwing out the best part. Like you can get the egg white if you want. But the other thing you got to realize about egg whites is that egg whites do contain a protein called avidin. Okay. And avidin binds, I believe it's, avidin binds biotin. So you don't want to become biotin deficient. You don't want to do that. So you don't want to eat your egg whites raw.
Why?
And personally, I feel worse when I'm eating egg whites. If I eat eggs, I only eat the yolk. I throw out the egg white. I just want the steak and the yolk. That's to me the ideal. So I know people like the egg whites because it's supposed to be a highly bioavailable protein. Well, if you're eating 2 to 3 pounds of steak a day, you're getting plenty of freaking protein, depending how big you are,
Why is biotin so important?
Biotin is a B vitamin that's involved in hair, skin, nails, all kinds of things, hormonal things.
Okay.
Yeah. And I will tell you this, there are animal foods that trigger immunologic reactions in humans too. Some people are sensitive to dairy and some people are sensitive to egg whites. There's also albumin in egg whites, which can trigger immunologic reactions. So again, we have to think like, how are people doing? Is there an issue going on with these things? And could it be optimized with some of the less immunogenic foods?
Well, I think the reason, since you asked the question, just to give you an answer, in the off season, most bodybuilders don't opt for egg whites and don't opt for chicken. They usually go more with like red meats or whole eggs, even salmon. I think when we're dieting for shows, we start stripping away calories, but we want to keep the protein, so we use things like chicken because it's going to be lower in fat, and that way we can start to manipulate our calories a little bit and start stripping away some of the fat off our bodies. So that's the reason for the chickens. We're looking for the purest source of protein. Now, without the fat, which kind of goes against what you're saying, which is why we're probably starving all the time, because I didn't realize when I thought of satiety, I thought about filling my stomach. I didn't actually even realize what you were saying about my brain feeling satiated and feeling like it didn't need any more food because of all the nutrients I've gotten. So when we're doing bodybuilding diets and we're doing primarily egg whites and chicken, so you're telling me half the reason I'm hungry is because I'm just not getting the nutrients I need.
You're just not getting the nutrients. I think you could do that. You could do that even better with lean red meat. And, if you didn't want the fat, look, rabbit starvation is a real thing. You can, if you just eat protein without carbohydrates or fat, you will lose fat. That is rabbit starvation. Eventually you will die like the Arctic explorers who could only eat rabbit, which is just protein. So this is also called protein sparing modified fasting. And, you can do these fasts and you will lose weight. You will lean out and you will preserve muscle mass by just doing protein without carbs and fat. But as most bodybuilders know, there are hormonal consequences to that as well. So there are more and less, I think, healthy ways to do that. And I'm not a bodybuilder. I've never claimed to be a bodybuilder, but I'm a pretty lean, moderately muscular individual for someone that doesn't bodybuild. I'm 5'9", 170. You know, I have muscles. I have a six pack. So I understand it, but I guess what you guys do is so different. To hold the amount of muscle that you guys hold is very challenging for the human body. And I understand how you do it and why you do it. And you kind of like bulk and lift, and then you just have to you have to put yourself in a starvation mode to get ready for a show. Yeah. And there's no way around that. You know, there's no way to do that in a healthy way. Your body's going to be like, yo, you're starving me, you know? So yeah.
So you're telling me, for example, let's take an off-season bodybuilder, or just take an average person. Let's say, not even say he's a bodybuilder. Somebody's trying to avoid snacking at night. I have that problem, right? My listeners know I'm a big food guy. Are you telling me that the more nutritious my food is, the less that snacking is going to start bugging me?
Yep.
So that's one of the issues I'm having, and I don't even know it.
Probably. Yeah. I don't snack between my meals. I eat 2 meals a day. My last meal of the day is usually at 3:30 p.m. And I don't eat again for the rest of the night. And then the first meal of the day is at 9 or 9:30 in the morning. So I'll do a compressed eating window, and I don't get hungry between the meals. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that's because I'm eating meat and organs and bone broth and connective tissue and tendons. And I'm getting in, you know, tonight I had a little bit of butternut squash, you know, earlier in the week I had some raspberries or some strawberries. And so it's a very nutrient rich diet. So depending how much fat you actually want, if you had egg yolks in your diet, that would help a lot. And liver and meat, those things are really good. Chicken is okay, but yeah, I agree with Stan. Ruminant animals, multiple stomached animals, that meat is more nutritious. And if you put in liver, man, then you're just jamming. Or even bone broth too. I mean, how many bodybuilders and guys are getting bone broth and connective tissue? That's critical. That's critical.
What do you think of those bone broth powders? Because I have some, but I haven't actually used them yet.
Better than nothing. Better than nothing.
So
but
how do you get your bone broth? You actually just boil the bones?
Yeah. So I have an Instant Pot, the best $80 I've ever spent, and not sponsored, no affiliation, but I have an Instant Pot, and I put in knuckle bones and water, and you pressure cook it for 4 hours, and it comes out, you put it in the fridge, and it's gelatin. It like shakes. It's just Jello. Yeah. And you can eat the tendons off the bone. You can eat the meat off the bone.
Well, how do you eat? Wait a minute. How do you eat the gelatin? What are you doing with that?
Oh, I just heat it up in a pan and drink it like a soup.
Oh, okay. So it liquefies after.
Yeah, it liquefies when you heat it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've never done it, so I don't.
I think that this is a real big problem for people. So the connective tissue is a key organ that your body needs glycine. And I'm sure bodybuilders get it. You need collagen, man. It's all the fascial tissue, all the ligaments, all the tendons that are connecting those muscles to bones. Yeah. And I just think that as humans, we do not get that enough because we're not eating nose to tail. Like, you know, I killed a deer yesterday when I was hunting, and I was eating the heart and the liver, and, you know, like, ancestrally, we would have eaten that thing nose to tail. All the tendons are going in stews, or we're eating the tendons. Like, I'm eating all the connective tissue in that animal. And then we just cut it all away today. Even if you have a steak with a tendon or something chewy in it, you spit it out, you throw it in the trash. We need that. So I had a New York steak for dinner tonight. Yeah. New York has a tendon in it. It has a really thick tendon. I'm like, I want that. That's good. Yeah, you need that. And we cut it out. People will cut out the tendon. And yeah.
So, I don't even know if you can answer this question, but out of curiosity, it's my own selfish question. I've been prone to a lot of injuries in my career, and I'm curious, is that a connective tissue problem? Like, am I not getting enough? Is my connective tissue not strong enough? Like ligament, tendon, these kind of things. Like, I'm not able to hold up to the pressure I'm putting on my body.
Very possible. I mean, you got to think about the massive amount of pressure that you're putting on your body with those lifts. You know, I'm good friends with Mark Bell and these guys, and you think, man, like, you're going to rupture a bicep. That tendon better be so damn strong with this, strong as you're going to make your bicep or your pec tendon or any of this, your quad. Like, absolutely could be a nutritional thing. Okay. Absolutely. And I see this all the time with people rupture discs and back aches. And I think, okay, I can fix this. It's just, simple. I mean, it's just straightforward. We don't think about it though.
I'm not going to keep you too much longer because we've been on for a while, but I want to ask you about hunting. So when did you start hunting?
I've been hunting for about 9 or 10 years now.
So what I want to ask you is what do you hunt? Do you hunt everything?
Yeah, everything. I hunt deer. I hunt hogs. I haven't hunted an elk yet, but I want to.
Okay. When you go out for a hunt, you said you eat the organs raw. Do you eat them right there, or do you take them home first? Like, are you going like?
I usually eat them right there just because it's fun with your friends. And yeah, yesterday I killed a deer yesterday morning, and we all ate a bite out of the heart and a bite out of the liver, just fresh, right out of the animal. You just eat it. Yeah, your listeners will love this. I probably shouldn't even tell you guys this. So we had the deer skull, and it's got the antlers, and we cut open the head, and I ate the brain raw.
Jeez. You know what? I've been.
You don't have to do that, but I did it.
It's probably one of the most nutritious parts, they say, the brain, the heart.
Super. It's delicious. It's treasured by ancestral peoples. You know, there's not really chronic. The deer was clearly not chronic wasting disease. I don't think there was any prion disease in the brain. And it's coming right out of the skull. It's completely sterile, and it's really mild. I love brain. It's very hard to get.
How many guys were you with?
I was with 2 other guys.
And they had some of the brain too.
They did have some of the brain. I was surprised. I got the majority of it. I was lucky. I was like the alpha. They just didn't want as much of the brain, so I got the alpha share of the brain.
Do your friends think you're weird?
You know, I think that anybody who hangs out with me now knows what I'm about, and they don't think you're that weird anymore. They're like, "Oh man, that was great." You know, they like what I do, and they're interested in it. Yeah.
So I don't hunt, but I'm fascinated by it. So when you go out and you hunt the deer, you kill the deer. Are you using bow and arrow or shotgun, or how do you bow? Okay. What's the next step? You cut it open right there and start kind of taking pieces of what you want. Like what do you do?
A small animal like a deer, you bring it out to the road, you bring the truck around, and you know, I'm on somebody's ranch, so you bring it out to the road, you bring the truck around, you cut it in the Achilles tendons, and you hang it, and then you strip the skin off, and you pull out the guts. You pull out the intestines and the stomach, and
this is all right there.
And the liver. Huh?
This is all right there, like on the road.
Yeah, right at the camp. Yeah.
So you cut everything out, save the heart. Are you eating anything at that time, or are you kind of going off?
We usually take a bite of the liver and the heart, and then sometimes if you have a fire going and you're hungry, you'll eat the tenderloin or the backstrap, like the best cuts right then and there. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just put it all in a cooler. Like last night, I just put it in a cooler and brought it home. And then before I jumped on this podcast with you, I was literally butchering the deer, you know, on my kitchen counter, putting meat in bags for, my friends. Do
you ever face any backlash from anybody because of the hunting thing? I mean, I respect hunters that eat their own. I don't like sport hunting, but I respect hunters that eat their kills. So do you get any backlash from anybody about it?
You know, it's so interesting. There's a lot of irony here. This is what we did as humans. Like this is the way we've always lived. Yeah. And I think it's so much more valuable to see the food and know where it's coming from. Every time I eat that deer, I'm going to know that deer. And I see it as a responsibility. That deer is kind of like giving its nutrition to me in exchange for a responsibility to live my life well and to be kind and empathic and just to do the work on myself. Mm-hmm. That's what it's about. And so I want to know the animal that's making a sacrifice for me. In order for something to live, something else must die. It's incredibly ironic when humans want to eat meat, but they don't want to see where it comes from. Yeah, right. Yeah. So I posted on Instagram yesterday a picture of me with the heart, the deer's hanging in the background. And I had the most number of people unfollow me I've ever had on Instagram. And I thought, that's awesome. You know, like that's just crazy that people, the post also got a ton of engagement, but I think people were grossed out by it. And it's like, do you eat meat? Do you know where this comes from? Like, I can't even tell you how much gratitude I have for that animal. Yeah. In order for something to live, something else must die. That is the way of life. And so if I get pushback from it, to me, it immediately makes me think, I'm not sure that person understands how humans exist on the face of this earth. Yeah. So,
well, it also is shocking because a lot of those people will go order a cheeseburger and not think twice. But I think actually seeing it kind of drives them a little bit crazy. Do you get pushback from like the vegan people because you're the carnivore guy? Like, do you even care? Are you like, this is just the way it is and I know this is the right thing, or does it bother you at all?
You expect it, right? You expect it. People always say to you, of course I get pushback, like bring it on. The conversations are valuable. And the vegan conversation is a tired one. At this point, I think it's pretty freaking clear that animals are beneficial for humans and that eating a plant-based diet is a swift path to nutritional catastrophe, and you can supplement like crazy. And I know there are vegan bodybuilders out there, and I can't even imagine the amount of supplements that they are taking. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't take supplements. Yeah. I make I make desiccated organ supplements for people, but that's food, right?
Yeah,
I don't take synthetic supplements. I don't take collagen because I eat the tendons. I don't take anything. I don't take a multivitamin. I don't do it. I don't take creatine because I'm eating the meat.
You don't take any vitamins and minerals? Like, because I have like a whole tackle box full of like different vitamins and minerals that I take. Really?
Nothing. Because I'm getting it all from the animal, right?
I guess if you're eating all the organs and everything, yeah.
And the bones and bone meal and calcium, yeah.
Wow. I think we covered a lot of stuff. I mean, there's a lot more I have to ask you, but it's been quite a while. Is there, maybe you'll come on again for a different one?
For sure. Can I talk about the epidemiology in Asia before we go?
Yeah, 100%. I'm happy to have you on as long as possible.
Yeah. And then I'll let you go, and I'll go back to butchering the deer. But I'm serious. So I was talking about all the epidemiology in the United States, and I want people to know that if you look at epidemiology in Asia, it looks completely different. And this to me is just a real indictment of what's gone on. So you can look at these same sort of observational studies in Asia where they ask people, how much red meat do you eat? And then you follow them forward. This is people in Taiwan and Singapore and Japan and China, over 200,000 men and 200,000 women. We're talking about almost 500,000 men and women in these combined studies. Mm-hmm. And they do the same sort of things in the United States. They ask how much meat and how's your health outcomes? And the outcomes are completely the opposite of the United States. The men who eat the most red meat in Asia have the lowest rates of cardiovascular disease. I want to repeat that. The men in Asia who eat the most red meat have the lowest rates of cardiovascular disease. That's heart attacks. The women who eat the most red meat have the lowest rates of cancer. Now, how is that possible? It's possible because the epidemiology is telling us about the narrative. It's not telling us that red meat is bad for humans. What's the narrative in Asia? Yeah. The narrative is that meat is affluence. Yeah. What's the narrative in the West? Meat is bad for you. So who eats meat in the United States? People that are rebels. Who eats meat in Asia? The people who are more affluent, the people who are actually trying to live good lives. Mm-hmm. So it's not that Asians can eat red meat and Caucasians shouldn't. That makes no sense evolutionarily. Right?
I have a question before you go on. And this goes back to the other question I was kind of pressing you on before, which is the amount of food.
Right.
Because I know in Asian culture, like if you look at an American plate, the protein portion is half the plate. Okay. It's usually half to a third of the plate. If you look at Middle Eastern or Asian culture, the protein portions are sparse throughout the meal. They're not the main part of the meal. So does that have any bearing on the studies you're talking about?
You know, I will add to that the data point that in Hong Kong, they eat some of the most meat in the world. They eat like a pound and a half of meat per day. Okay. And their life expectancy is 85.6 years. Okay. So it depends where you're looking at. You know, Hong Kong was certainly in that study. But remember that in this study, the men who eat the most red meat, right? Yeah, the men who eat more red meat have better outcomes. The women who eat more red meat have better outcomes. Sure. So there you're actually quantifying the amount of meat eaten by these people. Okay. So, yeah.
Amazing. Is there any advice you want to give anybody before I let you go? Anything you want to kind of just a general statement for the public?
The most pithy statement I can make is eat like your ancestors, not like your doctor, right? Okay. Doctors are not taught nutrition. They're not taught anthropology. They know nothing about human evolution. And so your ancestors ate meat and organs and understood which plants were the most toxic. Do that and you will thrive. And if you eat like your doctor, you'll probably end up looking like your doctor. And I imagine the majority of people listening to this have doctors they don't want to look like. Yeah.
Is there a breakdown of the entire diet anywhere, like on your website? Or I don't know if you coach anybody or you have coaches that work under you. Like, how can people learn more about the carnivore diet? So they can do a book. Okay, that helps.
Yeah, I wrote a book called The Carnivore Code. It's on Amazon and everywhere. It's a bestseller. Okay. On my website, which is heartandsoil.co. Mm-hmm. All of my podcasts, all of my videos are there. It's referenced under the Learn tab. And all of our desiccated organ supplements are there. You can just search by whatever topic you want. I've probably done a video or a podcast on it. I have my own podcast. Like I said, it's Fundamental Health. And so there's a lot of information there. My socials are all listed there. You can find me.
Do you know who Dr. Berg is?
Yeah.
Dr. Berg has like 1 million subscribers or something like that on YouTube. He is an avid, and I used to learn a little bit from his videos, but he's like an avid follower of like the kale kind of diet and all that. And I'm like, why, how are people gravitating to that if that's not the wrong, if that's the wrong thing? Why is, because he's known as the nutrition doctor, right? But he's kind of giving the opposite advice that you're giving me.
Yeah, well, he's not an MD. First of all, Eric Berg is not an MD. I think he's a chiropractor, to tell you the truth. I'm not actually sure what Eric Berg's credentials are. We could check real quick. He's not an MD. Not that I should pull the
the doctor card.
What's that?
Shouldn't pull the doctor card.
I shouldn't pull the doctor card because I don't like it when people do appeals to authority.
Yeah.
But he's a chiropractor, so he's not an MD. And there's nothing wrong with that. I have a lot of chiropractor friends who are brilliant, but what he is talking about is controversial because it's keto. And then he's talking about the greens, but that's what people are expecting. So it's easier for people to digest. But I would love to debate him anytime you want to set up on your show. I'll debate Eric Berg. A lot of people, I think, are realizing that ketogenic diets can be valuable for humans, but that you don't need the greens. And in fact, getting rid of the greens and replacing them with carbohydrates or cycling ketosis is really going to be beneficial. I think that, people can benefit by excluding processed foods. So this is sometimes talked about with plant-based diets. People say, well, how can a plant-based diet be good? This guy did a plant-based diet. He says he feels way better. Well, he probably feels better because he just got rid of processed food, right? Doesn't mean a plant-based diet is ideal. Doesn't mean a ketogenic diet is ideal. It just means, hey, you probably replaced processed carbohydrates with animal meat and some greens. That's great. You're there, but it's not the highest level, in my opinion. There's a better way to do it. There's a more evolutionarily consistent way to do it.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll see. I don't know if Eric Berg's too popular to come on and debate, but I'll try and get him on.
Let's do it.
But yeah, I appreciate your time, Paul. Thank you very much. And if you'll come on again, I'm sure we can have another hour of education for people.
I'd love to. If your followers have questions, they can send them to you. I'll come on and answer all the questions.
Yeah.
If people want to email me, with supplement questions or supplement recommendations or how to construct a diet, they can do it. All the contact information is at heartandsoil.co.
Okay. Thank you very much, Paul. I appreciate your time. All right, man. Bye-bye. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, share with your friends, and like the video. And if you get a chance, check out the description for all the different links to all the different places you can find Hostile and myself. And lastly, check out hostile.com for our new line of supplements and all of our apparel and gear. Thanks again for watching.